to sum it all up, if it wasn't for what happened, this book would have never surfaced. I would have never had the courage. I would have never put myself out there, put my neck on the line. I would have never been so open. I would have never felt so inspired. But because for me, after the experiences, I had a moment where I was just so angry. Because for me, it was like, this has been suppressed from me. I wouldn't have had suffered remotely as much as I have all my life. No one else would.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Psychedelic Conversations podcast. Today, I have with me Antonio, and this is going to be about a spiritual awakening through the plant medicines. Let's welcome Antonio to the show. Welcome. Thank you for joining me in this conversation.
Hello, Suzanne. Thank you for having me on the show. Hi. Hello, everyone.
You're welcome. So just a quick context and a background of who you are for the listeners. So you are the author of The Lockdown on Self-Love, a conscious frame of work inspired by your awakening through plant medicine, which inspired you to reverse engineer your life and self-inquiry. This is very interesting. So before we dive into your book and what was the call, the real call behind this, let's talk about your background a little bit and what brought you to this work. Let's talk about that, if that's okay.
The subtitle is called How to Make Suffering Work for You. So just to paint a little picture, basically, it grew from a lot of pain. I've had a really, so for the best portion of my life, ever since I was around 10 years old, I just felt like I was seeing life through through tinted glasses, really. I was bullied a lot. So I was born in South Africa, and then my parents moved over to Madeira. I lived in Madeira, and although I had a really good time over there, one of the first memories I had, like having friends, was like being around a group and being spat on, you know. And a few things were suppressed as I was growing up. I always questioned, so after Madeira, we moved on to England. And again, I just felt like I didn't really fit in. And I was always just trying to be the class clown, you know. And I did bad at school. I felt like something was wrong with me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it, you know. I couldn't quite get the measure of me, so other people couldn't get the measure of me neither. Just shy around girls, and you know, and I always wondered as well, why was I so uncomfortable around guys? You know, why was I just so insecure, or what have you? I used to get bullied a lot as well. Just got involved around with a lot of the wrong crowd. And I used to always kind of like feel sorry for myself, you know. I felt like there was something about me, but you know, and I mean, like, the reason why I felt kind of sorry for myself was like I could kind of see the hierarchy, you know, so far as other kids, you know, they're dressed better, they were in better classes, you know, they had nice girlfriends and what have you, you know. I started smoking weed, hanging around trees, you know, never comfortable around the people that I was with, because they always had something to prove, you know, and always kind of belittled you. Now, I've only ever been in 2 serious long-term relationships, one of which, the first one, was my first love, you know. And I was with her for 7 years, and that was pretty toxic. I mean, I was toxic as well, you know. I didn't know how to treat a lady. I mean, I didn't even know how to take care of myself outside of that, really. So going from one job to the other, And long story, really, you know, I ended up doing bad at college. So I already had enough proof at the age of like, you know, 15 going on 20 that I was a failure, you know, that I was never really going to amount to anything, you know, going from job to job. I mean, my CV is like that. I've had so many jobs. I've worked in a sausage factory. I've done this. And I used to feel so humiliated, you know, with myself. So, cut a story short, ask me the question again. What was the question again?
The question is what brought you here, and you did an amazing job explaining, because this is exactly how we track it back, and then these are the events, these are the stories, or the you know, the history that brought you here right now in the position that you are in, and made you, or at least led you to write this book.
So basically, thank you for answering. So little did I know that I hated myself, basically. And I only found out about 9 months ago that I hated myself, to just be real honest with me. And this is what this whole experience for the last couple of years has offered me, to just have a level of understanding, to be compassionate, to cut out all the excuses, really, to just be real honest and authentic, to just allow myself to be vulnerable. Which is really interesting because I talk about a lot of sensitive subjects in the book, which I would have otherwise rather not, because a lot of stuff that I've, for the best portion of around 12 years, was really ashamed about and what have you. So when I mentioned about the first relationship, you know, it was just for the best portion of 7 years, I was just from my parents to hers, to my parents to hers. It was just insane, you know. And I didn't feel safety. I didn't feel like I could express. And one of my biggest fears is not being seen and heard, wanting to be seen and heard, you know, and not being felt safe to comfortably just express my emotions and my thought process without having to be someone else, you know, without feeling like I'm wrong for doing so, you know. So it's interesting that I'm that guy that's written the book, really, because basically, so what I meant to say with the first relationship, what ended up happening after that, I had a child with her. And when we broke up, I lost everything. I completely just, you know, I lost my job, I lost my car, I lost everything. On top of everything, you know, let me be careful with this, because otherwise things could get closed. If I touch that button, it's going to go boop. Basically, kind of story short, I got involved. There's a lot of catalysts for the reason why I wrote the book. And one of them being was about 15 years ago, it was legal to buy methamphetamine at record shops called methadone, which was called MCAT at the time, sold under plant fertilizer. There was obviously, a loophole as to the way they were able to sell this. But a lot of us were addicted to it. Now, little did I know about it at the time, but after the breakup, one thing led to another, where I was invited to a party. And at the time, you know, I was very depressed and I was in a bad place, and I thought it was a good time. I thought it was a good idea. But they all thought they all initiated that it'd be a good idea to get some stimulants, cocaine in particular, you know. And yeah, we couldn't. And when I called around, I found out that I could get that substance, MCAT, that I mentioned about. So to cut another story short, basically one night I was due to have one weekend I was due to have my child. And one thing led to another, where me and the mother got into an altercation, and she was like, she hung up the phone. She was like, F you, you're not having your child now, you know. And that particular night, I thought, oh God, here we go. It's going to be the same old thing. I'm going to end up messaging her all night, you know. I'm just going to be, you know, shut down and what's the right word? Just ignored and rejected. And I'm just going to be crying all night, you know. And I thought it would be a good idea. Anyhow, that particular night, something ended up happening, which I ended up almost taking my life after that, because it was in the comfort of my family home, and I couldn't really live myself. But You know, I took one massive line under each nostril. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Before you know it, I was on another planet. You would have to buy the book yourself for anybody that's interested to find out the full story. It's taken a lot of courage. It's taken a great deal of vulnerability, but a lot of there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of catalysts. Is the reason why I wrote the book. Um, because I wanted to advocate transparency, and vulnerability is a true testament to strength. Anyhow, previous to the lockdown, I was given the opportunity. To work with plant medicine, DMT in particular. In fact, in my book, I've got a chapter it's in chapter 15 called "The Nights and the Rites of Passage," where one night after a second breakup, which, if you recall, I said that I've only ever been in 2 serious long-term relationships, one of which I've got a child by each. Now, the second time that she left me, you know, I couldn't cope. I was suicidal. I was really depressed. By now, you know, I had a codependency with stimulants, which was for around 10 years, which also formed a sex addiction. And so that's where a lot of the shame came from, you know. But I led myself to believe this was the only a fun thing to do. I was a plasterer at the time. It's a very physical job, you know. I put in so many hours. I had no friends, so the only thing that I did to kind of escape. And like I said, I led myself to believe there was only a fun thing to do, which I would do every weekend or any opportunity that I could get, really, because you've got to bear in mind now I had like the bogeyman inside me that just wanted to get to chase the dragon, you know, and I had formed an addiction which took over my life, really, that I had no control over, because as well, on top of everything, you know, I had this sex addiction, and it was the most, you know, I grew this. But anyhow, when I mentioned about the night and the rites of passage, basically one particular night, I felt I was in the space of my home, and I was under the use of stimulants. But I didn't feel safe at home, and I felt called to go out running. I felt called to go outside, for whatever reason, to find safety out in the woods or what have you. Now, I had an interesting experience when I went out into the woods. I felt like I teleported into another dimension. It was as if there were soldiers strategic all over the place, and I was stepping over them. And I'll never forget this, because then I heard pew pew, almost got you. I'm like, what the hell? I felt like I was synchronistically just walking systematically, like avoiding the soldiers that was on the floor. So I'm like, what the hell's going on? You know, as I'm going further down into the woods, you know, this aura, red aura, came towards me. But because I was having I was projecting certain stuff, it then withdrew. And I remember sitting down, because it just felt very like I stepped into an ancient place where it was as if it was in a strategic game where I went into another entity's realm or home, you know, where, for example, the X-beams were over there, the ninjas were to the back, and the soldiers were just strategically everywhere, like they're ready for battle, what have you. The moon as well looked like a tall being that was looking down at me. And I was just like, what? I remember sitting down, and to my left, there was like 3 Marines. And I remember instinctively, like, thinking to myself, like, these Marines were the ones you can fuck with, you know? So I just sat there for a minute, you know, and took it all in. And then started to feel eerie, and got up and walked away. And what was really interesting about all of this, which is sometimes I process into, is for the fact that, you know, as I was walking away, one of the Marines, as I mentioned, tried to trip me over and started sniggering. And so this was all too real. Now, the relevance why I'm sharing this story with you is how I got involved with psychedelics, because that particular night I was running, I felt called to prove myself to the gods. I was running from 10 p.m. to about 1 in the morning, just running, and running. What I now know is my higher self was just pushing me and directing me. Now, towards the end of the night, I felt like I wasn't going to make it home at all. I was dehydrated, my legs was cramping, etc. And at one particular point, I was looking to my left where I saw milk cartons on the floor with these glass bottles, right? And as I did so, I heard the church bells ring, the church bells go off. And I didn't think anything of it. But I ran towards the church, because I was like, something's going to be there. They can offer me water. Bang on the door, this, that, and the other. And then, but no one came. Anyhow, one thing led to another. And then it dawned on me about the milk cartons because I managed to find a tap. Now, going back to what I mentioned so far as the relevance to the story is that 3 days after that, by the way, obviously I made it home safe, that night. I managed to drink some water and that was it, I managed to run back home. But anyhow, 3 days later, I ended up looking on Facebook. And I don't usually ever go through comments and what have you, But this particular time, I'm formerly a plasterer. And I went on a plasterers group. And one of these comments, the status was how do you measure success? And as I said, I've never been one to go through people's comments, but I scrolled through and somebody had posted, do DMT, you'll know that success is nothing but an illusion. So I don't know, I still don't know to this day if it was my innate, if it was a conspiracy video I once saw about the spirit molecule. I really don't know. I know when I was young, I was really fascinated about the God concept, aliens. I've always been into quantum physics. I love metaphysics. So I really don't know. But I do know that I messaged him to say, I've always wanted to try DMT, He messaged me right away and he asked me, do you smoke? And at the time I did smoke and I was like, wow. So I replied to say, yeah. Anyway, he put me in contact. And about 3 days later, I got it through my house. Anyhow, to sum it all up, if it wasn't for what happened, this book would have never surfaced. I would have never had the courage. I would have never put myself out there, put my neck on the line. I would have never been so open. I would have never felt so inspired. But because for me, after the experiences, I had a moment where I was just so angry. Because for me, it was like, this has been suppressed from me. I wouldn't have had suffered remotely as much as I have all my life. No one else would. I've got 2 children. How dare you? How dare you? Keep this information away from me. And so, bearing in mind with a lot of the stories I mentioned with you so far as, some of the past accounts to what led me to now, I just couldn't cope, I just felt like I was me existing all my life.
Yeah.
I just, why was I so disconnected from myself, from everyone else? Why I was just constant under conflict, just feeling like my cards were dealt and now on top of everything. Like I've got a problem. I felt like I had a dirty little secret that everybody was shaming me about behind my back. I don't mind admitting it as well. I'm heterosexual, and I was starting to question as well my sexuality because of a lot of the madness involved with the use of substances, which now and again, bearing in mind, I said that was one of my past. One of my favorite pastime activities. I would lock myself in hotels by myself, and so that's what I mean to say. I was so, I little did I know I was trying to kill myself. I just didn't have the courage. With one of the experiences I mentioned earlier on in this video, I just didn't have the guts to go about it. Now, previous as well to my psychedelic experience with DMT, I was fantasizing, which scared the hell out of me, about putting a knife to my throat. So, look, one thing led to another. I started to have these experiences with DMT, and it was as if I was going through psychological surgery. I was always met with this entity that I'll never forget. Sometimes I would take the piss out of her because I would close my eyes, and she was always like, I was always offered unconditional love, but she was so complex, and sometimes I would take the mickey out of her, and in the mickey out of her in the sense that I would just have fun with her, and she would have fun with me. You know, she looked like this goddess, and she had this like this mask like that, and I always like that, like that, like what the hell was that all about, you know? But I used to see her quite often. But for me, you know, I was starting to think that, you know, I was dealing with cognitive dissonance, you know. I was like, I mean, am I losing the plot? Is this what I'm seeing real? Is it not? You know, but the more I got into it, and I started, for example, with my eyes open experience with DMT, I would see, for example, the air alive as one entity, like toying with me sometimes, you know, like moving from left to right. And then as I followed it, it would then acknowledge me, like, yeah, you can see me. And then one particular time he went like round me, touched me, and I just remember sitting down like so eerie, like, wow, you know, and I wasn't scared or nothing. But I was like, wow. And then in that particular moment, I started crying and cried and cried and cried. And he held me. The airline held me. And that was a moment where I looked in my hands, and it was as if I had a rebirth. It was just as if for the first time I acknowledged, like, wow, I'm alive. And that was the reason why I was crying, because I was like, wow, you know, I've taken my life for granted. I've taken everyone else for granted. I've taken my life out. I've taken myself for granted. Here I am having this experience. And it's almost like you can hear the symphony that we are halfway living, halfway not, unaware of the, you know, this experience really of just isness, you know, of just being.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all that you did. I just want to track back on a couple of things, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So this is incredible what you're saying, because anyone who experiences psychedelic substances, they usually talk about the entities, right? DMT entities are very, very popular concept that, I mean, Terence McKenna always talked about. He's got books on this. It's it's almost like there is a boundary, like, when do you know this is real? Not real, but when do you know that you are actually experiencing this? Or is it a psychosis? Or is it something, you know, something that is that your mind is creating? So a lot of the people that I speak to regards this, especially DMT, they, you know, continually, like, you know, with DMT and psychedelic substances, as you know, there is a stigma that these are just hallucinogens and they are not real, and they can create, you know, they can induce psychosis, and it's just a way of escape, a way of entering into non-ordinary states, or in a way just kind of escaping your own reality or pain or drama. But somehow, when they are used with respect, with humility, with in a container, and the person, I call the body as the container, because the person needs to be in a space where they are ready. Because one of the things that we need to tackle right now with the psychedelic substances is the recreational use. You know, in the West, as you know, this has been promoted as a party drug, not so much the DMT, but the LSD and MDMA and other. And you talked about another recreational substance earlier as well. I couldn't catch the name fully, but yeah, these are all promoted for recreational uses, and it's been used that way for decades. Now, what you're talking about is completely the other side of the experience in psychedelic substances. It is more intentional for healing purposes. And I love what you said about, you know, I could have saved decades of suffering if I knew earlier, if I could have a container, if I could access it earlier with this kind of intention. But somehow, you know, I feel like this is the challenge. This is the educational part of the psychedelic substances, that it is lacking, and therefore, you know, number one would be, how do we tackle with the stigma around these, because they are known for recreational uses? Secondly, Not everybody goes into it with intention, ritualistically. They don't get it, they don't understand it. And right now, currently, a lot of the people are talking about re-traumatization through psychedelics, like going into it, even with intentional use, healing or therapeutic use. They are talking that there are many people are being traumatized right now, and they are being almost psychosis are induced through these experiences. So I know we still have a lot to learn. We still have a lot to study, research, understand, and maybe get a glimpse of and a grasp what these are, which I in my own experience, I definitely believe that we're not capable of grasping what they are in their full potential, but having it or looking at them from the therapeutic use somehow is a good way to enter into the space. And especially someone like you have received so much benefits, being able to reflect and introspect into your life and your history and your patterns, and look at your relationships and your relationship with yourself. That is huge. I feel like, the number one, issue or the key is that having that disconnection and not having a relationship with ourselves. And somehow psychedelic substances tend to connect us back to this knowing, or the intuition, or just having that understanding of our own patterns and behavior, or impulsive behaviors, let's say. And thank you for talking about the addiction as well. For me, addiction is just a mechanism that helps us cope. I don't judge it. Doesn't matter what addiction it is, alcohol, games, whatever. It's like retail, even a retail. I mean, this is another, like, we can open a little window here. People continually judge addictions. They put them on a scale. Someone who's an alcoholic is okay. I mean, it's kind of bad for the health. It's their health. It's toxicating their health, but it's okay. But someone has, I don't know, gambling. They look at it differently. It's almost like we have categorized these addictions to, one is less and the other one is more shameful. Do you know what I mean? But ultimately, what are they serving? Ultimately, they are just serving the person to cope with their inner chaos and pain, right? It's an escapism. It doesn't matter what it looks like. So I think, number one, we need to kind of come to terms with addictions are all the same. It's the point is that what is it doing for the person? And why is this person choosing to do this? Like, what is that deeper pain that needs to be addressed, as a lot of the trauma researchers talk about nowadays? What is that inner trauma? What is that, held trauma inside? Obviously, the society doesn't allow us to work through these traumas because of our inhibitions, because of the stigmatization of vulnerability. You talk about vulnerability. I'm sure you said a lot in your book, which is great. It's almost like vulnerability is dismissed, almost shameful to be vulnerable. As a guy, for you to be able to talk about yourself and your patterns and your impulses this way, I can just imagine the backlash. I can just imagine the critique, or even people just not wanting to engage with you because it makes them so uncomfortable. Like, imagine you talking about the addiction part, the messiness of the, past history. Imagine talking about this person to person. Like, in the book, it's fine. It's almost like you've written it, it's out there, and people can just secretly buy and quietly follow and read it, and probably not even mention it to you that they've read your book. However, when you imagine having this conversation like we are having now, face to face, we're having this conversation, you're being super vulnerable and you're willing to open up, that could really trigger a lot of people and make a lot of people super uncomfortable in their own skin somehow. This is the level of stigmatization is around vulnerability. And that's why let's leave psychedelic substances aside. I feel like this is the number one issue that we cannot heal. As human beings, we're wired to be seen by the other, witnessed. Our experiences, it's almost like we require to be witnessed. We need to be witnessed in our life, in our journeys, in our experiences without being judged. But somehow we cannot do that for other people. And that's probably why we cannot heal. That's why we continually, secretly, behind closed doors, we kept going after these addictions and behaviors and patterns, right? And then the more we do that, the deeper the shame gets, the deeper the complexities and the chaos. And yet, psychedelic medicines, I call them, but substances, they come in and they break down those walls. They literally, shred you to your bones, where now you have no choice but to be vulnerable. Somehow vulnerability is deeply connected to healing. And if we're not willing to go there, there is no healing. Forget about it. There is no healing. We need to just forget the whole thing. Stop paying for expensive programs and coping therapeutic tools. They are just managing our states. They're not healing us. A lot of these holistic tools, meditative tools, therapeutic tools, we became a self-development junkie, trying to learn everything. We know so much because of the information technology. With a click of our finger or tap of our finger, we can access so much information, yet we cannot embody it, because the element of having a container, having those people that witness you and allow you to be vulnerable without getting cringy or critical, it's so hard. So I think that's why a lot of people are choosing the psychedelic substances as a healing modality, because somehow, even for a moment, even for a few hours, these substances, they disarm the critical, judgmental side of us, where we drop all of that and actually see people for who they are, then which allows and breeds this container that could people benefit from. Not always, because, I don't want to go to the shadows of the psychedelic substances, because right now, every day I am reading an article about how dark the energy in those circles and how dark the facilitator can be, and they're serving their ego. Therefore, the container is not safe. Therefore, everyone's re-traumatized, and they're left to be, they left in to deal with it in their own demise. All of these are, but let's not go there, because that could be another whole episode on its own. Because my passion is also to talk about the shadow, the dark side of the psychedelic substances. If we can't bring that in, then the education will be not fully the truth of it. Like, if we want to really get into the truth of what these substances are, we need to talk about the healing therapeutic aspects, but also the shadow aspects and dark side, right?
Can I share something?
Of course, please.
So, guys, wait till you read chapter 17. Honestly, just go on Amazon and get the Lockdown of Self-Love and see how much it's taken for me to put out there. For me, I feel like I had a moral obligation. I had an experience, basically, which told me this was what I was born to do. And as much as that's hard to admit, in spite of what you just said, I had a traumatic experience through it's called chapter 17 is called the Magic Mushroom Ceremony. And I've done a high dose, and I was not safe. I was not in a safe environment, and a lot of stuff happened. A lot of crazy stuff can happen with the use of psychedelics. I mean, DMT, for example, is like a 15 to 20 minute experience, but ayahuasca and magic mushrooms is like about 6 to 7 hours. LSD is something else, that could be about 10 now. I'm never touching LSD again. I touched LSD once, oh my days, it was, if I could have just ended my life that night, it was just a lot of confrontation within myself, a lot of shadow elements. Now, the reason why I stopped you there is because, yes, Chapter 17 was very much for me, you know. I mean, for one, I'm grateful for the experience. The divine, yeah, the divine feminine was unlocked within me, you know. Um, I experienced oneness. I experienced non-duality. Um, I'll never forget that experience. You know, I'm God, and I'm the universe, just having a simulation of yourself. You know, that it's just a vastness of infinite possibilities, an experience within an experience, having an experience, an experience within an experience, having an experience in itself, just for the love of it. You know. And for me, so far as you know, I started doing shadow work and came along 2020, right? And when I saw everybody wearing a mask and stuff like that, I was like, wow, here I am doing shadow work, you know, which I learned to take off the mask, metaphorical level. You know,
Yeah.
everybody was just wearing a mask and aware that they've got many, many, many masks. And I found it really interesting where we are as a collective, you know. And for me as well, you know, I've always known that the biggest organ in my body is our skin, you know. They've got pores. So for me, I was like, well, you know, if there was a virus either way, we all fucked, you know. Um, and you know, it's a time in our lives to just is to use discernment. Really, it's a lot. It's a lot associated so far as with trauma, you know, where it blocks our sixth sense. And it's really interesting, you know, we're sensual beings, you know, they use primarily our five senses. And so we try to distinguish our life so far as whatever. And this is why, look, I just want to acknowledge you. Thank you very much for the work that you do, you know, because this is what it's all about. People like us that's had the courage to step out what's normal and what's, you know, and to start bringing awareness so far as that the world, that we've been birthed into a world that's been designed for us by a cult, if you will, by a lineage of families that's been here for a long, long time. And a lot of the reasons, you know, I mean, you've got to ask yourself, you know, how do we live in a day where there's homeless people and whatever, and this and the other? It's, look, you mentioned this as far as you know, we'd need another episode. I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours and hours. And this, you know, I love all this. I'm fascinated. I'm grateful for one. But yeah, look, yeah, you know, it's. I haven't. At the very beginning, I used to do DMT a lot. But for me, you know, I was trying to come to terms like, what is this? Trying to make sense of it, and. And for one as well, for the first time in my life, you know, I was experiencing unconditional love. Excuse me, guys, I've got the sniffles, by the way. So, um, but yeah, you know, I was experiencing unconditional love. And how do you describe unconditional love? It's like you're the most significant person in this world. It's radical acceptance. It's you know, you're perfect the way you are, you know, and that's what it offered me, that element of forgiving myself, allowing myself to be my authentic self. And it's interesting what you mentioned so far as personal development is concerned. Why might work for you, and why you might read that work for someone else might not work for you, but it's a great tool to start from and being introduced. I mean, psychedelics for me initiated me to personal development and spirituality, where there, previous to that, I thought spirituality was just a lot of woo-woo, if I'm honest with you. You know, personal development as well, I thought was just, you know, like some guy that, you know, he's got a good, some silver spoon-fed kid who like, look how great I am. This works for me, and I'm not pissed off, mate. You don't know what I've been through, you know. You know nothing about hardship and what I've been through. How's that supposed to work for me? But personal development changed my life. Spirituality saved my life, you know. And
Also, Antonio, would you say that it's because you were ready? Because the very beginning, you said something very powerful. You said, use the suffering to work for yourself. Like, this is very powerful. Somehow the pain seems like the algorithm it's a universal algorithm for all of us. I haven't met anybody come to this work because they are comfortable in their lives. I haven't heard any story that people are drawn to psychedelic substances because they live comfortably. People who are really hit the rock bottom, because earlier, again, you said, when you were talking about your story, what brought you here, you talked about being suicidal. You talked about, incredible suffering. You talked about being abandoned, rejection, and shamed, and bullying. Like, can you see the patterns here? Like, this is a universal algorithm that I see among all of us. And yours is this way, but someone else might experience this rock bottom feeling differently. I feel like the pain as a rock bottom, or the suffering, brings people to psychedelic substances. Again, it is not for everybody. It doesn't mean it's going to work for someone else. You reinforced that beautifully. You said, just because, this is work for someone doesn't mean it works for me, and what works for me doesn't work for other people. I think this is a very conscious, intentional approach. We need to recognize that it is not the tools that we share that serves people. It's the stories, our authenticity, our vulnerability, our story of coming from a dark, painful place and then moving towards the light, moving towards healing, is what serves people. And somehow, if we are the kind of people that stigmatized by vulnerability, telling our stories because the society expects us to look all together, we need to look like we figured out this life ourselves, our relationships, our finances, everything, our education, where we need to almost, there is a pressure on everybody that we need to show up in this world looking all together. I'm not going to use the word perfect. That's so like being used and thrown around all the time. It's not about looking perfect, but it's not about looking all together. And that doesn't serve us, because we push everything back down and suppress, and then the body communicates these suppressed emotions in pathological illnesses. One of the things that I continually say in this podcast is that I am blown away and moved by people who encountered cancer, terminal illnesses, terminal illnesses, that they turn around and say to me, that was the best thing ever happened to me. How is that even possible? Right? But it is, because it's almost like, just coming back to what you said, when everything is taken off under our feet and we're fragile, like we hit the depths of fragility and the loss and despair and chaos, that's when we get cracked open and change begins. And those people are the ones that usually seek out psychedelic substances, right? And again, if we can make this educational aspect of it more solid and safe, and if we can somehow create frameworks for harm reduction, I believe these substances can serve a lot of people. Not everybody, but some that really, really need it. And this is my take on substances. And by you sharing your story, what are you doing? You're giving the people the opportunity to also see, like, be a mirror, because, we have these blind spots, right? We can't see ourselves for who we are. And the stories, that's what they do. They help us see what lies in the other person also lies within us. That's what we need to be with. And stories, I love quotes, by the way. You probably already recognize already. I love quotes. And one of my favorite is that stories will change the world. Stories, they have the power to change the world. And by having the courage and sharing, and that's probably why we are called to share our stories when we heal, or at least go through the transformative or transcendence process, I say. Again, my personal belief or outlook on healing is very different. I don't believe we can be fully healed. I just know that we can become fully aware and manage, because the tendencies and the blueprint of the patterns will always be there, but we do not entertain them after a while. And I call that healing. When we grow in capacity to contain and be super self-aware, I think that is what healing is, that we seek, right? So thank you for sharing your story. We will put the links in the show notes, and of course introduce you to the world, because and for the people that listen to this podcast, I think it's so timely. And I love what you said, the time when people were beginning to wear the masks, you took the mask off. I think that's such a great metaphor. So thank you for doing the work. Also want to acknowledge you.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
So is there anything else would you like to add in terms of let's open a window here and talk about the harm reduction aspect. So what would you do differently with what you know now about psychedelic substances? Like, what would you do differently entering into the space, or at least consuming them? How would you approach? I know sometimes we say what happened is exactly what you needed, but we always say what happened is exactly what you needed at the time. But now that you know what you know, how would you approach it going forward? Or even those people who are seeking or called to it, what would you say to them?
Look, you hit a nail on the head. Everything, the way everything worked out for me, worked out perfect. I guess I've always been naturally expressive either way. I've always worn my heart on my sleeve, and some people just feel like some people aren't comfortable, and that's all right. Not comfortable to just kind of express themselves and reach out for help. Now, me personally, I just went on Facebook. I went on every avenue I could, and use certain keywords on Google and just express myself, And I spoke with a lot of people. So that's what I would recommend. Just, put yourself out there and get in contact with people with similar experiences and this and the other. Look, you mentioned something so far as what was it exactly where you said it? But what I mean to say is our roomie said this very well. We're just holding each other, giving each other a hand, making a holding each other. How is it actually? We're just all here helping each other home.
Would you say community then in that case? Find the community, find the people that are maybe a few steps ahead of you in this, psychedelic substance use in therapeutic way, maybe, and also have them to keep you accountable, because I find the accountability is super important in this space, whether it's a facilitator, whether it's a participant. If they are going to go into the group ceremonies or sessions, I always say, make sure you screen the person, screen the substance where it's coming from, make sure this person is trusted, and the people that are coming in, also screen the people that are attending, right?
Yeah.
Because this is where we open up. This is where we open our energetic fields to receive other people's energies. So I think entering into this space should be taken so seriously, just like going into like a psychological surgery, like you said.
Yeah.
I find healing through psychedelic substances are no different than going under a brain surgery or psychological surgery. So we need to be super mindful and be careful and really serious about this work as well. It can't be taken lightly.
Yeah,
and also be ready, right? Be ready for what's to come, because that's the next level of the work.
Yeah, and very well said. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, well, absolutely. Just do thorough research, and find a facilitator that will work for you. There are many facilitators out there, and you're always going to have a diversity of chances and whatever. But just so far as finding a practitioner, just use due diligence really, and on top of everything, look. At the end of the day, this is very, very brave work. I haven't touched psychedelics for ages. I don't have the courage to do so. It takes so much, to just surrender and what have you. But Wow, what a fascinating subject. And I just want to say thank you as well again. This is something I would love to speak about a lot about more, but it's something I'm still finding my voice. Interesting fact. Ever since when I first shared my book, I shared a manuscript on WhatsApp with my parents and both mothers of my children. I felt like it was the right thing to do out of respect, you know. In fact, I wasn't able to see my daughter for 4 months because she thought I just lost the plot with a lot of the subjects I talk about towards the end of the book. I mean, for one, I took the touch base on a lot of trauma, and then everything that the pharmaceutical industry has pumped out so far as the information with plant medicine is that you are induced with psychosis, you know, and yeah, it was a bit of a uncomfortable subject for her. But we've since have a very good relationship. I've seen my daughter since. I've just had to, you know, be very understanding, not criticize or whatever, accept it, and understand as best as I can, and give it time, you know. Anyhow, guys, thank you very much for being here, watching us. Thank you for this opportunity, and it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antonio, for pouring your heart out and also sharing your story with us. Like I said, we'll be sharing your link to your book with our listeners. Thank you guys for joining in again for another amazing episode. Appreciate you, and thank you for the likes, the shares, and comments. We are seeing increase in our subscription, so I really appreciate you for all the support that you're providing here, driving this kind of conversations as part of the educational part of the psychedelic substances. So I really appreciate you, sending love, and see you guys on the next one. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.